You write in Manufacturing Consent that it's the primary function of the mass media in the United States to mobilize public support for the special interests that dominate the government and the private sector. What are those interests?
Well, if you want to understand the way any society works, ours or any other, the first place to look is who is in a position to make the decisions that determine the way the society functions. Societies differ, but in ours, the major decisions over what happens in the society, decisions over investment and production and distribution and so on, are in the hands of a relatively concentrated network of major corporations and conglomerates and investment firms and so on. They are also the ones who staff the major executive positions in the government, and they're the ones who own the media, and they're the ones who have to be in a position to make the decisions. They have an overwhelmingly dominant role in the way life happens, what's done in the society. Within the economic system, by law and in principle, they dominate. The control over resources and the need to satisfy their interests imposes very sharp constraints on the political system and the ideological system. And they do this in all sorts of ways, by selection of topics, by distribution of concerns, by emphasis and framing of issues, by filtering of information, by bounding of debate within certain limits.
2.5 minutes to air. No. 45 seconds.
They determine, they select, they shape, they control, they restrict in order to serve the interests of dominant elite groups in the society.
There is an unusual amount of attention focused today on the 5 nations of Central America.
So what we have in the first place is major corporations which are parts of even bigger conglomerates. Now, like any other corporation, they have a product which they sell to a market. The market is advertisers, that is, other businesses. What keeps the media functioning is not the audience. They make money from their advertisers. And remember, we're talking about the elite media, so they're trying to sell a good product, a product which raises advertising rates. And ask your friends in the advertising industry, that means that they want to adjust their audience to the more elite and affluent audience. That raises advertising rates. So what you have is institutions, corporations, big corporations, that are selling relatively privileged audiences to other businesses. Well, what point of view would you expect to come out of this? I mean, without any further assumptions, what you'd predict is that what comes out is a picture of the world, a perception of the world, that satisfies the needs and the interests and the perceptions of the sellers, the buyers, and the product. Now, there are many other factors that press in the same direction. If people try to enter the system who don't have that point of view, they're likely to be excluded somewhere along the way. After all, no institution is going to happily design a mechanism to self-destruct. It's not the way institutions function. So they all work to exclude or marginalize or eliminate dissenting voices or alternative perspectives and so on because they're dysfunctional. They're dysfunctional to the institution itself.
The role of the news media is central to the modern democratic process. For most people, the news media are the dominant source of information about the world. They tell us what matters, they tell us who matters. The way we vote or the way we respond to opinion polls is based largely on media information. So the quality of a democracy now depends upon the information they provide.
The mainstream media really represent elite interests, and they serve those elite interests in a way that can be described as carrying out a propaganda function.
If you want to understand the way some system works, you look at its institutional structure. How is it organized? How is it controlled? How is it funded? And so on.
The big question, of course, is what kind of information do we get? Does it come from a diverse range of perspectives, or are some views dominant and others excluded? The most commonly repeated theory is that the media tilt towards the left or to the liberal end of the political spectrum. What's curious about this view is that there's almost no evidence to support it. In fact, the bulk of evidence suggests that the media tend to be biased the other way. The spectrum of opinion most often represented goes from centre to right, while voices on the left are generally absent.
In the last 10 or 20 years, there's been massive research documenting the fact that the media are extraordinarily subordinated to external power. It's long been understood, hundreds of years, that unless people are controlled, they're going to challenge power. They will not simply willingly accept subordination, domination, hunger, and so on. Nobody's going to accept that if they have choices. So it is therefore necessary for those who are in the positions of control decision-making, monopolize wealth, and so on. It is necessary for them to somehow keep the population from their throats, as they put it. And that can either be done by force, or as force, that capacity declines, by control of opinion. There's no other method. I think people have the capacities to see through the deceit in which they're ensnared, but they got to make the effort.